These people might actually be remembered best for their deaths rather than the lives they lived.
He is then hanged.
Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 infamous real-life executions.
Somewhere around 6:20 or 6:30, the lights in the prison went off, and that's the sign when they switched to the generator.
For this list, we're looking specifically at official executions as ordered by the state or government throughout history and across the world.
At the last moment, however, she turned to the matron and shook her hand and then very impulsively leaned over and kissed her.
Number 10. Ernst Kaltenbrunner. Several Nazi officers were captured and executed following the end of World War II, but none was more prominent than Ernst Kaltenbrunner. As a high-ranking official with the SS, it was believed that he had direct knowledge of the workings of the concentration camps that resulted in the deaths of millions of Jewish captives. At the Nuremberg trials, Kaltenbrunner was charged with conspiracy to commit war crimes and crimes against humanity, and was then sentenced to death. He was executed by hanging on October 16, 1946. Number 9. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg.
One of the greatest peacetime spy dramas in the nation's history reaches its climax as Julius Rosenberg and Morton Sobel, convicted of revealing atomic secrets to the Russians, enter the federal building in New York to hear their doom.
While spies and double agents make for exciting fiction, they posed a serious threat to the United States and its Western allies during the Cold War. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were two alleged Soviet spies captured by the United States and charged with passing along information about the atomic bomb.
When Julius and Ethel Rosenberg took the stand, they denied any involvement with the Soviet spy ring. When questioned about their membership in the Communist Party, they took the Fifth Amendment.
Their trial began in 1951 and captured the attention of the nation. The married couple was found guilty of espionage and was executed by the electric chair. While Morton Sobel, another American found guilty of spying during the trial, claimed that Julius acted as a courier for the Soviets, he did not claim the same for Ethel. Number 8. Sir William Wallace.
Just one chance to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
One of the most famous figures from the medieval period, and a leading member of the Scottish Rebellion against England, William Wallace has become one of the most recognizable names in history. Despite leading his people to several key victories during the Wars of Scottish Independence, he was betrayed and turned over to the English in 1305. Wallace was tried for treason and was sentenced to be executed. He was dragged naked through the streets, strangled by hanging, but not until death. After which he was emasculated, disemboweled, decapitated, and drawn and quartered.
The 4 parts of his dismembered body were sent to Berwick, Edinburgh, Aberdeen, and Stirling, the scene of his greatest triumph, to warn the Scots.
Number 7. Guy Fawkes.
Remember, remember the 5th of November.
Considered, quote, the last man to enter Parliament with honest intentions, Fawkes was a member of a group of English Catholics who attempted to blow up Parliament with gunpowder in 1605.
He's very willing to kill for his beliefs just as much as he is to die for them.
The main goal of the gunpowder plot was to kill King James and replace him with his 9-year-old daughter, Princess Elizabeth. The plot was uncovered, however, and Fawkes was captured. While his steadfast manner earned him the admiration of King James, he was tortured and was sentenced to death by hanging and quartering. Number 6. Anne Boleyn.
He believed that what he wanted was what God wanted. And so if there is something which Henry wanted, like getting rid of one wife and replacing him, it was God's will.
One of the most famous womanizers in history, Henry VIII of England was married a total of 6 times. Of all his wives, however, perhaps none is more famous than Anne Boleyn. Considered a heroine of the English Reformation, she was married to Henry for 3 years.
The prosecution evidence was entirely trumped up. It was very, very weak. Everybody knew it was weak. But by the same token, everybody knew that it was Henry's will.
She was unable to produce a son to serve as Henry's heir, however, and she was eventually charged with adultery, incest, and treason. Imprisoned in the Tower of London, she was eventually beheaded on May 19, 1536. Number 5. Marie Antoinette.
The mechanism falls like thunder. The head flies off. Blood spurts. The man is no more.
The French Revolution wasn't kind to the aristocratic class in France. While King Louis XIV was arrested and executed, the most famous casualty of the revolution has to be his wife, Marie Antoinette. She was faulted for the economic crisis in France at the time, thanks to her extravagant expenditures. She was eventually placed under house arrest with the rest of the royal family.
Her children are ripped away from her. Her children were the most important thing to her, and she knew that her son was going to be subjected to terrible abuse to make him forget that he was ever royal.
Her fate was essentially sealed after the execution of Louis XIV, and she was charged with treason and executed by guillotine in 1793. Number 4. Ted Bundy.
The King County Sheriff's jurisdiction averaged about 7 murders, 6 murders a year up until 1974. We'd never seen anything like this.
One of the most infamous serial killers in American history, Ted Bundy admitted to being responsible for killing 30 women throughout the 1970s, although the actual number is likely much higher. He used his good looks and charming personality to lure young female victims before assaulting them.
He feels the eyes of the nation upon him, and he revels in the spotlight. He is famous.
Bundy was ultimately captured in Florida and received 3 death sentences. And he died in the electric chair on January 24, 1989.
The execution of Ted Bundy couldn't come fast enough for a crowd that was beginning to feel like a lynch mob.
An estimated 2,000 people celebrated with songs, dancing, and fireworks in a field across the street from the prison immediately after the execution.
We are your sons and we are your husbands. And we grew up in regular families.
Number 3. Saddam Hussein.
And it is said that he killed when he was 10 years old. He killed a person.
Known as the Butcher of Baghdad, Saddam Hussein served as the 5th president of Iraq for over 20 years.
Peaceful efforts to disarm the Iraqi regime have failed again and again because we are not dealing with peaceful men.
He was widely condemned in the Western world due to his brutality, which included killing political opponents and using chemical weapons against his own people.
Saddam was hitting everyone in sight, even Uday, who was on his sickbed. He broke Uday's arm, imprisoned him for 45 days, tortured him, and put all of us in prison.
In 2003, a coalition led by the United States invaded Iraq to remove Saddam from power, and he was eventually captured and hanged. Video of the execution was leaked online and became the subject of global controversy.
The way he gave up and didn't fight and gave himself up to us right away was against everything he told everybody else to do. I think forever that probably tarnished Saddam Hussein in the eyes of all Iraqis.
Number 2. Joan of Arc.
For God and France!
The Maid of Orleans is a heroine of France who helped lead her people to victory in several battles against the English during the 100 Years' War. She was eventually betrayed, however, and handed over to the English by the Burgundians. She was tried on a number of charges, including cross-dressing, and, despite a lack of evidence, was sentenced to death and burned at the stake at just 19 years old. She was declared a martyr 25 years after her death, and is one of the 9 secondary patron saints of France. Before we unveil our number 1 pick, here are some honorable mentions.
Lord, into your hands I commend my spirit.
Your life is finished. What?
Timothy James McVeigh has been executed by lethal injection. He was pronounced dead at 7:14 a.m.
You sabotaged my ass, society, and the cops, and the system. A raped woman got executed.
Gilmore's status as a symbol was inevitable. His execution paved the way for the hundreds that have followed since Gilmore uttered his unforgettable phrase, "Let's do it."
Good evening. No execution has received this much attention in decades. In this case, it's because so many people are convinced of his innocence.
Number 1. Jesus.
My God, why have you forgotten me?
While some may debate the religious aspect, Jesus is widely considered to be a historical figure that did exist. A preacher in the 1st century AD, Jesus' teachings angered many of the religious leaders in Judea. He was eventually betrayed by Judas, one of his disciples, and handed over to the Romans, after which he was sentenced to death by Pontius Pilate and crucified in Jerusalem.
He has been found guilty of blasphemy.
Whether you believe that Jesus was the Son of God or not, his execution remains one of the most influential moments in history. Do you agree with our list? What do you think is the most infamous execution in history?
It is my duty to defend Ernst Janning, and yet Ernst Janning has said he's guilty.
For more exciting top 10s published every day, be sure to subscribe to WatchMojo.com.